first thing that we need to do is go through a PowerPoint, and I have shortened it about 3 times, trying to get it as abbreviated as I can. But I need assurance from each of you. I need something very important from everyone in this room, including building principals, who are your school test coordinators. And that is your assurance that, Kathy, I know my manuals inside and out. I have read them. I know what's in them. I've got it. That's the assurance I need from you. And I'm not asking you for that right this minute. But by Tuesday, I need that assurance from you. And you don't have to literally give it to me. I'm just trusting you that you're going to take care of that as a professional. If you're giving a paper pencil test, if you're giving an online test, if you're giving both, if you're giving PARCC, if you're giving Ohio, whatever you're giving, you need to know your manuals. I mean, there are multiple manuals for this the whole thing, PARCC in Ohio, online user guides and so forth, that I've tried to weed through so that I'm only giving people the pieces and parts that they have to have. But the piece and part that you have to have is in your administration manual. Okay? So I'm going to start through this PowerPoint, and what I'm going to ask you to do, and I hope you'll understand, because of time, I'm going to pass out some index cards, and as we go, if you have a question that you think can be answered at the end of the PowerPoint, write it on the card. I will come along, I'll ask you to pass them to the end of the table, and I will answer the questions. But just to try to keep the process moving so that we can get to the Access Next site and get you in those sites, I'm going to ask to be able to try to get through this PowerPoint as quickly as possible. Do you understand? And if it's something that's really holding you up, of course, raise your hand and I'll be glad to answer your question. But if we could just kind of spread them out, let them have those, and we'll go from there, all right? And I've asked Jeannie McKenzie to be here, and she's going to make special note of things that I may not have the answer to, because I learn every day. I learn every day. And you will learn too. And it's all right. We're going to get through it together. This is not something that one person can do on their own. You can't do this on your own. If I don't do my job, you can't do your job. If I don't do my job, school test coordinators can't do their job. So it's like an orchestra. We're all going to play our magnum opus. Okay, we're going to have our great orchestra performance. And we're like an orchestra, and so the brass, they have to be ready to play their part, and that might be 3rd grade. The woodwinds might be 4th grade, and the accommodations might be the percussion. But it's like, and so that when we start, when it happens, we're all in concert. Okay, it's going to take everybody doing their part to make the music beautiful. So I wouldn't want to be with no other group but this one, getting ready for PARCC testing, because you are an encouragement to me every day, and I love working with you, and I bless you and pray for you all the time, because you're wonderful. So with that being said, enough of the blah, blah. Kathy, get on with it. We've got stuff to do. Okay, so I'm going to try to cover PARCC and Ohio tests. They're very similar. Quite frankly, if you can learn the PARCC Pearson Access Next, you will fly right through the Ohio. Okay? So the goals for today is to, first of all, understand the security protocols, the ethics for test administration, the logistics and procedures for test administration. And a lot of that information will come from your school test coordinators, your principals. They'll be giving you directions about what they want you to do. I want to make sure that you understand and recognize the content that's in your administration manual. So if you brought your administration manual with you, I think that's a good thing. You may want to follow along at least the table of contents, so that you can note special sections, and if you want to refer back to it and read it later, you can flag it or fold the page down or highlight it or whatever you like to do. Most importantly, because of our time together, I want to make sure that you learn to manage a test session on the Pearson Access Next site, the online site. I don't think it's extremely difficult, but a couple of the groups I tried to work with the other day, the first group, we ran into some issues. So I want to make you feel better and have you get in there. It'll make you all have a better weekend. I want you to be able to know what to do on testing days. When the day comes that you know what you're supposed to do. And if you have a question, where do you find the answers? I want you to know where to go, who to ask, okay? So those are the goals for today. First of all, and I hope everybody's got a PowerPoint presentation, because this information is in there, you're going to be a seeker of some of your own resources. if you have a question. These are the places I've told you guys on several occasions about these websites. PARCCpearson.com is your one-stop shop. If you remember no other website for PARCCpearson.com will get you whatever you need. So that's the first one. The AVASET is more like an index. It'll be an index of documents, and when you click it, then you have to download the document. It's not my favorite. I like PARCCpearson.com better, but your preferences, you may like the AVASET site. Then the site for Ohio is ohioportal.aras.org, and that is your social studies and science areas and I put in your mailboxes. If you're going to be giving a social studies and science test, you received in your mailbox about a tutorial. It's 15 to 20 minutes long. It's online for AIR, and I would recommend that you take that. Now, I didn't check today, but the TIDE interface, which is like Pearson Access Next for Ohio, is not yet up and running. So I'll be working with you in small groups about the Ohio test. So if you feel like you still have questions today about the Ohio assessments for social studies and science, don't sweat. I'll get with you in small groups and we'll work it out, okay? These are the manuals. There are administration manuals for 3, 5, and 6-8. Everybody should have their manual. There's also manuals for paper-based. You should have that. There's an Ohio State test manual. It's one manual for both tests. And then those of you who work with accommodations, special educators, and intervention specialists, speech and language therapists, and classroom teachers, you probably have seen this resource, which is your accessibility features and accommodations manual. A lot of acronyms floating around. The ones that you need to know about are roles. When you read your manual, it will outline what all these acronyms mean. There's quite a bit in it to help you out. But basically, the district testing coordinator, that would be me. The building test coordinator or school test coordinator that you'll see in your manuals, that's your building principals. And when you see something about an accommodations coordinator, that would be Francie Berg in this building and Todd Johnson at the high school. Of course, you're going to see something about IT or tech, and you're going to know that's Susan. And EMIS, Becky Fletcher. And then when you see test administrator or proctor, that's you. You're the most important. You're the one that's going to make it work and make it successful and make kids feel good about what they're doing. And so my job is to help you feel good about what you're doing. So these tests that are coming up, this first set, as you know, is performance-based assessments that are given at the 75% of the way through the school year. So that's no big surprise to you anymore. One thing that's important for you to keep in your mind as I go through and I talk about testing is I'm going to refer to units and sessions. It's important for you to remember that on the ELA, there are 3 units for this PBA. There's Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3. The first one is literary analysis. The second one is a research simulation, and the third one is a narrative writing. And they have to be given in that order. The first one, then the second one, then the third one. If I'm a kid, I have to take them in that sequence, first, second, and third. With the math, there are 2 units for math. And so when I talk about a unit, I'm talking about one assessment. If I talk about a session, I'm talking about all 3. Like if I talk about the ELA session, I'm talking about units 1, 2, and 3. If I talk about a math session, I'm talking about units 1 and 2. And that's for this spring performance-based assessment that's coming up here in about a week and a half. Now, there also, you know, there'll be another set end-of-year test, and there's just 2 units in the ELA and 2 units in the math at that time. But again, units and sessions, 2 different things. So like when you read your manual, you kind of got to get your head around that because we tend to think about our test like it's one test in one day, and it's not. So that's an important piece for you to think of. So the test schedule you guys have, Mr. Skelton has given you very thorough descriptions for test sessions, but you know, if you read the information from the state, they give you 25 days for PARCC, and the district has to pick 20. They give you 15 days for OCBA, and the district picks 10, and that's already been done. You already are familiar with the guidelines for administration time. Mr. Skelton touched about that, about how it's recommended that we give some additional time in order to help kids get where they need to be, just because it's a different testing situation, especially the online. Paper tests are very similar to what you've given in the past. Very similar procedures and processes. Okay? So the guidelines for administration is that you just make sure you provide the whole amount of time for the kids, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I know they'll all be done in 50 minutes, and even though the test book says 60 minutes, I'm going to schedule 50 minutes. No, you give everybody the whole amount of time, okay? Once the unit testing time has over, so let's say your kids are taking Unit 1 ELA. Now, I'm done with my test. What does the student do? And it's been the decision of this building that you would ask students to have something to read when they are finished, and they are to read quietly. Now, this is a security issue, and this is to be followed throughout the building. This is not a class-by-class decision. So every test administrator and every teacher needs to remind students, make sure you have something to read for when your test is finished, okay? Because when they're done, that's what they're supposed to do until everyone else is finished, okay? And of course, you're going to have some kids that are going to have accommodations and so forth with their IEPs, 504s, and I'm sure you're already aware of that. That's why we have the small group test administrations and so forth. So this last bullet, how do you finish your script? That's what I'm talking about. Get something to read. You have something to read, get it out and read it. Okay, makeup testing. There is makeup testing that will be available for children who are absent during a unit. I am going to ask you as test administrators, there is nothing you need to do for makeup sessions with your children when we get to the online portion, when we get into the online management. So you don't have to worry about that, but your school test coordinators will have to worry about the makeup testing. So you know you're going to have kids who are absent. You're going to have kids that are ill and not able to finish the test. They've started it, not been able to finish. I mean, maybe we won't, but somebody will. Somebody in the district will. And that will all be able to be made up. But once the kid does a makeup session, they're not allowed to return to an earlier portion of the test. So they will exit right where they're at, and they'll come right back to there and resume right from where they left off, not able to go back into the test. All the test security and administration protocols will still apply, and this is the only instance in which the units can be taken out of order. I told you take Unit 1, then you take Unit 2, then you take Unit 3. If I'm a kid and I sit down to take Unit 1 and I get sick and I can't finish it, and then I've been out of school and then I come back and we're ready for Unit 3, and I haven't done 1 or 2, I can go ahead and take 3, but I still have to go back and make up 1 and 2. That is the only time that it can be taken out of order, is when you're doing makeups, okay? And again, your school test coordinator will schedule the makeups themselves in the same online system that you're going to be using, okay? Here's some guidelines for breaks, but I got to tell you, I've told almost everybody this, I don't know that I would give any breaks. I mean, if you've got a kid that wants to use the restroom, they're allowed to go, but your proctor has to go out in the hall and wait for them outside the door and usher them back. And they can only go to the restroom 1 at a time in the middle of testing. That you can't say, oh, my whole class is going to go to the restroom. You can't do that. So I would try to get them to go straight through. Most of those sessions, most kids will be finished about an hour, except for your kids that take more extended time. And for those kids, you're allowed to do a stand up and stretch break in the middle of testing. You can tell your kids to cover their screen, and you can just have a piece of paper with tape, just have them flop it over, and stand and no talking. They can stand, they can stretch, they can wiggle, and then they can sit back down. You can do that, okay? So here we are, it's a week before testing, so what should we be doing? One of the handouts that you picked up when you came in is a checklist. It looks like this. It says, task for test administrators to complete before testing, okay? So we're going to go through these. You can skim and scan and read this as I kind of go through it. You need to make sure, we're a week before testing, so review the test administration manual and attend training to understand policies and instructions for this test administration. That's what we're doing today, okay? We would have done it last week, but snow, okay? So what else? You need to sign a security agreement, and that's what Mr. Casey was sharing with you before we started. It's what's in your mailbox, and you're saying, I understand the ethics, I understand the procedures and policies, and I'm going to keep this secure. You know, this, again, is not something you can talk about. The specifics to security are clearly outlined in your administration manual, all the do's and don'ts and things that you can do and you cannot do. So, and we will talk about some of the breaches and so forth here in just a minute. You need to prepare your accommodated test if necessary, so you need to be knowing who you're assessing. and what students are getting the accommodations, and if you're responsible for providing any of that or not. You need to have administered your paper-based and your computer-based tutorials, and I believe everyone's done that. Sat down and gone through the practices with your kids. There are paper-based practices and computer-based practices. If you're a test administrator for either and have not done that, you need to work with a gen ed classroom teacher, like I think about title teachers or something, so that you can get a chance to go through that with a kid and see what that looks like. We're going to participate in practice testing and infrastructure trials, which we've started and we will finish, do some more. Understand your management of your testing sessions. And this last one, this test administrator tutorial, that's for the Ohio test. So that's teachers in grades 4 and 6 need to take that. So when we get to next week, okay, when we get to week after the next and we're getting ready to test, you're going to need to get your environment ready. You're going to cover your visual aids, remove your clutter, clean the work areas, get your scrap paper ready for your kids. You prepare that. You're responsible for getting their scratch paper ready. They have to put their name on it, and you have to turn it in when your testing session is over because they will have practiced problems on it. So you turn that back into your school test coordinator when your session's over. But you're responsible for getting it ready and preparing it. You're responsible for getting them pencils and getting them all sharpened and ready to go. If you have an allowable accommodation where you've got, like in mathematics, there's a math reference sheet, or if there is a calculator or anything like that that's permitted, you're responsible for getting that together. And the most important thing of all is you need to make sure you need to do it immediately and then check before testing comes that you're getting access to that management set on the Pearson Access Next, that you can get in there and then you can navigate that. So on the day of testing, you're going to go see your school test coordinator in the morning and you're going to receive your materials. You're going to you already got your script. Your script is in your administration manual. And actually, if you read your script, that will answer a lot of your questions about seal codes and things like that. So you've already got your script. It's in your manual. You're going to get your testing tickets. If you're an online tester, you're going to get your testing tickets and your seal code, and all that information will be given to you. You'll get a list of who's supposed to be in your session. If you're a paper-based tester, you're doing the same thing that you would have always done. You're going to go get your books. You're going to get your materials. And there's a chain of custody that you will have to sign for your folder or for your books. And then when you're done with your testing session and you take it back, you sign that you're returning them. That's all. They call it chain of custody, but it's those of us who have tested OAA, OPT for years, that's typical procedure. You sign your materials in, you sign them out when you pick them up, you sign them in when you take them back. And they're kept in a locked and secure place. And that is the responsibility of your school test coordinator to make sure that happens. Okay? So, one important thing that I want to tell you is that you keep time. A lot of people are really concerned about the time. Some misunderstanding is that when I push start, then it starts clicking, and then the test will shut down after 75 minutes or whatever. That's not what happens. You're the timer. The computer is not keeping time on your students. You are the timer. So you're either going to be watching the clock, if you turn yourself, and by the way, if I need to say this, make sure your cell phones are off. Okay, make sure your cell phones are off. But if you want to use your cell phone as a timer, like to set, you can do that. You can use a timer, regular timer, whatever. But you're responsible for managing the time. When you click start on the online session, which most of you have seen that, the students, that's when they can log in. They can't get in until you click start. You want to have everything ready to go so that when they log in, you're Johnny on the spot. You're starting to keep track of the time. So you will keep time. You will supervise and monitor activity, and your supervision looks like this. You and your proctor. This is what your supervision looks like. Active monitoring. It does not look like you go sit at your desk and grade papers or read a book or do something different. If you're seen not monitoring appropriately, it's considered a security breach. It is listed as a security breach. I've never seen that before in testing, but it is like that in this. So I just want to really caution you that you take that very seriously. And then, like I said, if you choose to give them a stretch break or whatever, that's up to you. And then anything that happens that's not quite right, a test irregularity or security breach, you would want to keep notes about that and report that to your school test coordinator. The day of the testing, you receive your materials. Don't forget, if it's ELA, you're going to get headphones for your kids. Again, I'm just kind of reiterating, managing the test sessions, read the script, distribute the materials. You're going to help students log in. You're going to troubleshoot that computer a little bit. And I don't think there's anything else in here that we haven't talked about. These are some steps to get you into Pearson Access Next. Now, I don't know whether you brought the handout I gave you. Most of you I met with on Wednesday, is that right? On Wednesday, and I gave you kind of like a step-by-step guide how to get into Pearson Access Next and what to do. And this is basically what you're going to be doing there. You're going to be going into Pearson Access Next. You're going to start the sessions. You're going to monitor it, that bar that says whether they're ready or not. You're going to manage any interruptions. You will help them exit. That's something the student has to do. You don't do that. The student has to exit. And if they exit and need to resume, you will do that. And actually, this says completed and marked test complete status. Cross that out. That is going to be something your school test coordinator is going to do. We're not going to have test administrators complete or mark test complete status, okay? We're going to have them do that. Because as I shared with some of the groups the other day, once that happens, that has to be, every student's finished with that session. So you don't know whether you may have someone in your session that still needs a makeup. So just to avoid having any confusion, we're just telling people, don't do that part. We'll have school test coordinators do that. Okay. So this is the site, and I'm going to take you to live. But this is the site we looked at. In a minute, I'm going to have you get on to laptops. They're in the back of the room. And I'm going to have you go to the practice site. Remember, there are two. I don't want you to go to the site that's all set up and ready for testing. And we are still making, actually, some adaptations to that site. But there's a practice site that you can do whatever you want. You are not going to hurt anything. Yeah, I will here in just a minute. Yeah. So most of you, some of you are telling me that you got an email about the practice site, about setting your password and your login. That's because, and you know how I am, I always tell it just the way that it is that when I set you all up as users, I set you up in the live site, and in my brain, I had you all in there. Well, I needed to set you up in the live site for testing, and I needed to set you up in the practice site as well. I did not set you all up in the practice site. So some of the difficulty you were having was my fault, and I apologize for that. I went back after some of our problems and read, and I found it in a Access Next online user guide, one little line that said, you know, like reminder, they have to have their own account. I'm like, crud, you know, I'm so sorry. So now it's on tape, everybody knows. So that is what happened, and that was my fault. So I am, like I said, I am learning too, but you should all be good to go now, which is I guess the most important thing. You will log in with most of you, unless you changed it, your username's your email, and then whatever password you set. And here's what I told people when I was very clear with 3rd and 4th grade on Wednesday. The only thing you need to remember in managing these sessions is this middle testing tab that's on your homepage. And you only need to remember 2 clicks, sessions and students in sessions. That's the only 2 you'll ever use, is testing, sessions, and students in sessions. You go over to the session list, you find your name, you click on it, then you go back up to testing again. You say, I found my session, now I'm going to go to students in sessions. You click your students in session, and your kids will pop up, the list of your kids. Now today, when we're practicing, it's going to be gobbledygook for their names. It's going to be letters and numbers, and it's not going to make sense. But when it's real, it will be your children. And I've been going in and checking to make sure that who we linked teachers with out of this building, their children are showing up, and it is that way in the live site. You can look at it, but I would suggest that you not mess with it. So that's what we're going to get to practicing now. You will also have an online system for Ohio for those of you in 4th and 6th grade. This is what it looks like when you go to your Ohio page. You will find a section for the TA interface. That'll be your management site for the Ohio test, but it is not yet operational. So we'll have to work together. This is the site. If you lose your sheet that I put in your mailbox about your test administrator certification course for grades 4 and 6, this is where you can get a hard copy. This is the site right here. And that's what it looks like. It takes 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, and Susan went through some guidance for computer-based testing troubleshooting. Some breaches I have to talk about to go through security with you. You cannot open materials prior to testing. If you read your PARCC manual, it will say that special version administrators can open it 2 days before. If you read the Ohio appendix, it says, no, you can't. So don't break a seal code. You don't get to open any package of your paper-based testing till the day of the test. Okay? Some other security breaches. Anything like your book isn't right, you look at something and you find like if you're doing a paper-based test and the book or the page number's not right, anything you think that just doesn't seem right, make sure you save it, report it. I've had people put, more recently, I've had everything from the wrong kid got the wrong special version book and they got accommodations they weren't supposed to have. I've had that happen. That kind of stuff, when it happens, you have to report it immediately, and then your school test coordinators have to report it to me. I have to file a report for everything like that. So like I had last year, I had a school test coordinator who sat books in a secure place, and there was a water leak, and water ruined the test. And I mean, you know, that kind of stuff. Those are irregularities. Security breaches are when you say things you shouldn't say. And here's the bottom line. You can't talk about this test, period. You're really not supposed to be looking at it when the kids are taking it, although, I mean, I know we're going to look at it. We're going to see it. But you can't then, after the testing session, go into your lunchroom and talk about what was on that test. You will lose your license. And I'm telling you flat out, don't do that. You can't go to your hairdresser and talk about what was on that test. You can't go home to your husband or your kids and talk about what was on it, or your students. You can't do any of that. It's all locked down. So you're the CIA, NCIS, FBI. You are sworn to secrecy. So just don't talk about it. Don't talk about the items on the test. Okay? You can't. Some other things, and I'm just going to go off the cuff here, is that teachers ask me about. If you want to show a kid a tool that's on their toolbar, show them where it is and say, this is this tool on your toolbar. You are allowed to do that. What you can't do is then say, this is how you use it. Because once you start down that path, then you could be giving an answer, you know. So you can't do that. But in the webcast that I heard the other day, they said that you could point out the tools. But here's the thing is the kids should, I mean, that's what we're working on up front, right, is to let the kids know what tools are there. But you can't help them use it, you know. You can't, if you want to repeat directions, you can repeat directions. But you can't go over to a kid and specifically help them with an item. You can't do that, okay? So those are the kinds of things, that would be a security breach. Those are kinds of things that people get in big trouble for. So and most of you, if you've got a big group and you're doing online testing, it's the test administrator and the proctor. Maybe the proctor or test administrator can cue the other professional and say, thank you, that will be good. Thank you for helping them. In other words, shut up, that's enough. Don't say anything else before you get into some hot water. So anyway, those are the kinds of things that are security breaches. And then, of course, if you get anything that's contaminated or damaged, and this really relates to paper-based testing, if you get into a snag technology-wise and you can't proceed, like your whole class is shut down, you know, just note the date and the time, and we'll do it at a makeup session. We'll do it at a makeup session, you know. So you're going to call, you're going to try to get help. In your packet, Susan is setting up a calendar for each day who you call. So when you get your packet, you'll know, today if I have any trouble, I'm going to call Jeff Haynes and I'm going to call Tony Miser. Those are my help people today. And that's who you'll call. But if with their help you can't solve it, you know, Or if you've got one kid who's totally shut down, get them on another machine. Get them on another machine. If that doesn't help, then they're going to have to just make it up at another time, okay? So, and then you'll just have to mark it and document it. So, you know, you're going to document on your paperwork, as you've done in the past, kids are absent, they get sick, if they have any trouble and they're not able to finish it. I mean, that is not new. That would be the same thing you probably would have, most of us who've been given tests would have guessed that would be what we'd do. Do you remember when we talk about paper-based tests and the kids would puke on the test, and you got to take the test and put it in a plastic bag? Same thing, okay? Same idea. If they puke on their paper-based test, get a plastic bag, put it in there, document it, time, and so forth. Don't document what was in. I'm sorry. Okay. So, and then you would just do whatever happens. See, that's where you see in a resealable plastic bag. So then there are security barcode labels that your school test coordinator will affix at a later date. So, okay, I think. If we have a snow day, they recommend that we just continue with our schedule. So when you come back to school, your school test coordinator will let you know whether you're going to pick up with the schedule as it was planned, or you're going to go backwards and pick up that missed day and readjust the schedule. But what they recommend is that you just continue. But then if your unit's out of order, that can't work. So you likely will probably, you know, just back up the day and then start testing from there.